Today we're opening up and showing you how to disassemble a reconditioned 3-gallon keg. These are sold from Adventures in Homebrewing. I think they sell them through their Austin Homebrew portal as well. But these are used kegs. They are pin lock kegs, which means they won't work with your ball lock equipment. You'll either already have disconnects for pin locks because, like me, you use pin locks for all of your kegs, or you'll have to buy different disconnects to use these, or you should be able to buy, there's adaptive posts that fit onto these pin lock kegs but have ball lock connections. Now I bought 2 kegs. I've already pulled one apart, so I'll show you the interior parts here on that one first. In the interest of honesty, I have opened this one up already, so it won't be quite as exciting, but that way I can show you the process without all of the heartache that's involved with trying to open these up. So let's slide over here, take a look at these parts. And these 3-gallon kegs, the parts are a little different from a normal 5-gallon keg. The lids here, for whatever reason, multiple manufacturers created these 3-gallon kegs, and they all create their own little lids that have different pressure release valves, and for whatever reason they seem to be slightly different sizes from one keg to the next. So I try to make sure that I keep each lid connected to the keg that it came with. Usually I only open one at a time and clean it. That way I know all the parts for one keg are broken up and all the other kegs are put together. But if I were to put this lid on the keg we're about to open up, it wouldn't look like it seals correctly, and vice versa for the other keg. That could be an issue if you've got a problem with the lid and you need to replace it. You might be able to find a lid that matches this manufacturer for a 5-gallon keg and replace it, but impossible to say for sure. I've never tried swapping them out and actually running beer through them. I just try to keep track of and take care of the equipment I have. But that being said, when you pop open these kegs, the first thing you'll notice is the kegs are really, really dirty. They've been sitting in a warehouse for like maybe 15 or 20 years because using these corny kegs for soda went out of style like in the 90s. So you've got some syrup that's been sitting all over in the interior of the equipment. It's been maybe hot, so it's been drying out, and it becomes a really nice glue on some of these parts when you get the keg. So aside from the fact that you'll want to initially like just kind of do a quick wash on the outside of the keg, so whatever rust and dirt and maybe grease are on the outside isn't being smeared all over your house. You'll also want to know that you've got to deal with some mess on the inside of these kegs. This is especially important with this liquid post. The liquid post normally has some of this syrup left behind in the top of the post, which makes it very difficult to pull this out. Keep in mind as well that with the pin lock posts, you've got to work around these pins to get the posts on and off. And I'll show you the special tool that's involved to do that. But with the amount of stickiness, there's a risk that you'll snap one or more of these posts off. So it's a good idea when you buy these kegs to, number one, buy a new set of gaskets for the posts and the lid, but maybe also buy a new set of posts just so that if at some point you snap one off, you don't end up being stuck waiting for a replacement to come, which can be a problem if you've just filled up one of these kegs with beer. But I'll talk a little more about how to get these off and how to avoid breaking the pins. For now, I'll show you the 2 pipe pieces that go on the inside of the keg. The short one, obviously, is the gas in. These vary from keg to keg. Sometimes you'll see they're about this size, which is a little shorter than what's on a lot of my 5-gallon kegs. The big difference is with the liquid outpost, it's much shorter, and it doesn't have the bent portion down here. And that's because if you look at the bottom of these kegs, the liquid doesn't pool in the very bottom of the keg. It actually pools on the side. So let's see. In a normal 5-gallon keg, all of the liquid pools here in the middle. On these 3-gallon kegs, you can see there's kind of a hump on this side here. This is where the liquid will ultimately drain down. And the pipe runs down here to this point and draws liquid from right here. And just like with the lid, sometimes these are different sizes, both not only in length, but also in diameter. And so this piece may not fit in the other keg that I have, or any of my other 3-gallon kegs. So again, you want to keep track of these parts, try to keep them together with one keg, and also take care of them, because if you bend one or cause damage to it where the post won't go on correctly, you may have a keg that you're not able to use anymore. So let's talk equipment here. So the equipment that you'll need to open up one of these kegs, pretty simple. A screwdriver is helpful, just be able to pry off some of those gaskets, or if you need to pry off a piece to get some of that sticky syrup out, that's good to have on hand. You'll need to be able to pull the post off. To do that, you'll need a socket. With ball locks, you don't have to deal with the pins, so any socket that fits usually will work to pull those off. But because you've got to deal with the pins, you're going to have to get a special socket that has notches that will fit these pins. So if you look closely here, you can see that there's some notches on the side, and these notches fit both. Straight down here is your gas post, which has 2 pegs or 2 pins, and then if you kind of look from above, you can see that there are notches for the liquid, which has 3 posts. Now, because these, especially the liquid post, has been likely glued in by residual syrup, you might need to use some force to be able to get this off. A normal ratchet set might be able to work with this special socket, but you may need to get yourself a breaker bar to be able to really get some force behind that. Now, I will tell you that in my experience, if you try to just force your way into especially the liquid post when it's stuck, the most likely point for it to give out is not going to be turning the post, it's going to be snapping one of the pins off. And here's an example of a post where I did such a thing. You can see here that there's nothing on this side here, and we've got 2 posts on this side. It's missing the 3rd one down here because I snapped it off while trying to take this off. So don't look at your first option being to just force this off. Looking back at the top of the keg, I've done an okay job trying to wipe this off and get some of the dirt off. It was much dirtier, so you can, I don't know, see this a little better, and I don't get quite as dirty while taking this apart. But let's see. Here we go. So we've got the liquid post here. It's a good idea, in my opinion, to go ahead and just try to loosen up the syrup before you start pulling off the post. Job number 1 is going to be to depressurize this keg. You don't want to start trying to twist these posts off and have a bunch of pressure come out and maybe shoot one of the posts off into your face. So I've already depressurized this one, but the easy way to get this done, if you don't have a tool to work a pressure release valve, or the lid doesn't have one, which sometimes is the case, is you can just take your screwdriver and press down on the poppet in the gas post, and it will come spray at you. I will say these come really highly pressurized, so don't have your face down there, otherwise you're going to get a pretty sharp blast. But we've got that done, so our next job is to start pulling these off. Once you're depressurized, I just fill up the sink with hot water, flip this over so the top of the keg is in the bottom of the water. Let it sit there for 5 or 10 minutes. This will allow the syrup that's built up here in the liquid post to kind of soften up, and should give you a better option or better luck turning this without popping a pin. But even soaking it, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to turn this without snapping one of the pins. So again, it's a really good idea to go ahead and have a spare set on hand. But let's say you've already depressurized, you've already soaked this in water, you've dried it off, now it's time to start pulling these off. So just take the socket, fit it. I like to do the gas first because it's the easier of the two. Just fit it on the pins so it sits even. Snap in your ratchet or breaker bar and just start turning. The gas post shouldn't give you too much trouble opening because there's not really a lot of syrup that gets up this way. So it should just twist off, and then you may or may not be able to pull out the remaining piece on the inside. If you are, that's great. You may need to, once you've got this open, push it up from the bottom. So you've got that done. The next thing I like to do is go ahead and pull off the lid. Now in this case, this lid has this notch over here, which helps seat the lid when you put it on. It's also a pain because you've got to make sure that you've got to kind of work the lid to get the bottom part of the lid underneath the lip and then this notch on top of it. But pretty simple. Just going to open, push that down to get it to open. When I initially open this up, the gas gets stuck, which is fine. You just pull it off. But it's plenty sticky, so definitely going to need a replacement on this one. But here we go with the lid. We've got this pressure release valve that may or may not work. All I really care about is whether this keg can pressurize. If I need to, I can depressurize it by pushing down on the gas poppet, as I did before. But we've got the keg open. Then we have the tough part of getting this liquid post off. Now, I've already taken this off, so I'm not going to have to do any work to push this off. But hopefully, you've soaked this in hot water. It probably will stick on you, but if you're really having to put some pressure on it, probably want to give it another hot soak. Maybe let it sit for longer. Keep trying, just because the posts are not cheap. So you want to save breaking them if you can. But same thing, you'll use your breaker bar or whatever you have on hand. Twist that off. It'll pop off. This one, pretty good shape. Poppet looks good on the inside. So we'll just want to replace the gasket. And then this one's sticky, so you'll have to work a little to get this off. And that is pretty gross. Now these are old syrup kegs. And let's see. You can see here, this is a Coca-Cola, as pin locks often are, which means you may get some sort of mid-90s syrup. I've had Coke and Sprite are the two most common. In this case, I got some special ones. The other keg has a little bit of what is undoubtedly sun-kissed. This one, I'm not entirely sure what this product was. Oops. You can see in there, it's green. It's neon green. I'm thinking this was Surge, which was Coke's Mountain Dew competitor. I don't know if they still make Surge or what the backstory on that is, but I'm pretty sure that's Surge in there. If you look, you can see there's some kind of brown or yellow things in there. Those are either bees or wasps. Don't know how they got in the keg. Lid was probably off and it sat drying out. And they got in there and drowned and most importantly, they are dead. The syrup is normally is just like a really thick, sludgy kind of syrup, like a super thick maple syrup. In this case, this stuff is rock solid. I mean, I could probably scrape it out, but it definitely has a like, I don't know, like a slurpy look to it, which it's probably, you know, whatever it was contributing to it, but it's definitely firm. It's stuck in there. Yeah, it's there we go. Yikes. So Surge, right? What do you think? Surge. Well, anyway, whatever the heck it is, it's going to take a lot to get that out. This one's going to need way more work than any of the other kegs I've cleaned out. But it will come out. That's the good thing about working with stainless steel. Trick to get all of these cleaned is hot water, soap. Do what you can to try to get them cleaned out. OxyClean or PBW is useful. What I'll probably end up having to do with this one is a long hot water soak to try to melt that mystery syrup, and then take some soap and water to it, and then water and OxyClean. Then I'll give it an OxyClean soak for a couple of days, rinse it out, see how it is. If it still smells like syrup, there's probably still some syrup in there. So I'll repeat rinsing, OxyClean soak, rinse, and keep doing that every few days until it's clean and doesn't smell like any kind of weird syrup. So that's pretty much it. Not terribly exciting, but if you've never opened one of these up before, or you've never worked with these 3-gallon kegs before, it's helpful to know, especially with these pins, because quite frankly, I broke the liquid post on the first 2 kegs I got because I didn't realize how much work it was going to be getting those off and how easily those pins will snap. So if you take nothing else away, if nothing else in this video is important to you at all, soaking the top of the keg before trying to pull off that liquid post is definitely worth the time.